Let's talk about NATO. And no, not in some military expert, acronym-heavy way. Just a straight-up, simple explanation of what NATO is, why it exists, how it works, and why you keep hearing about it in the news. You don't need a degree in political science to get this. I'm going to keep it clear, real, and actually interesting. So first off, what is NATO? It stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Sounds fancy? But at its core, it's a military alliance. That just means a group of countries that have agreed to protect each other. If one of them gets attacked, the others will help defend it. It's kind of like a security pact. You mess with one, you mess with all. That's the basic idea. NATO was formed in 1949, just after World War II. Europe was still in pieces. The Soviet Union was rising in the east, and there was this huge fear that war could break out again, this time between the West and the communist East. So 12 countries, including the US, Canada, the UK, France, Italy, and a few others, got together and signed the North Atlantic Treaty. The message was simple. If the Soviet Union or anyone else tried to attack one of them, the others would have their back. The big feature of NATO is Article 5. That's the famous one. It says that an attack on one member is considered an attack on all members. It's only been used once, after 9/11 when the US was attacked and other NATO countries stepped in to support. So even though it's a military alliance, NATO doesn't go around fighting wars all the time. Its main role is to prevent wars by showing strength through unity. Over the years, NATO grew, from 12 members in 1949 to 32 today. That includes countries from all over Europe and North America. And recently, even Finland and Sweden joined, which is a big deal considering how neutral they used to be. The idea is, the more countries join, the stronger the alliance becomes. But yeah, not everyone's a fan of NATO expanding, and especially Russia, which sees it as a threat. More on that in a bit. So, how does NATO actually work? It's not a world army, and it doesn't have its own soldiers sitting around waiting to be called. Every member country has its own military. What NATO does is bring those forces together for training, coordination, and missions when needed. It's like a giant team with a shared playbook, but everyone still owns their own equipment and makes their own decisions. There's a NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. That's where political and military leaders from all the member countries meet, plan, and make decisions. And no, the US doesn't control NATO, but yeah, it does have a lot of influence. The US spends the most on defense, and it plays a major leadership role. But decisions have to be made by consensus, which means all countries agree before action is taken. So it's not like one country can just order the others around. All right, time for a quick break. If you're still watching and this is making sense, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. And if you like this kind of clear, no BS explanation of world stuff, hit subscribe. It helps more than you know and lets me know what to make next. Cool, back to it. Now, NATO isn't just sitting around waiting for war. It is involved in all kinds of things, from disaster response and cyber defense to missions like peacekeeping or fighting terrorism. It sent forces to places like Afghanistan, Kosovo, and even supported patrols in the Mediterranean. But still, its main job is deterrence, basically making sure no one wants to start a fight with NATO in the first place. So why does NATO matter so much today? Well, let's talk about Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 and then again in 2022, NATO became front-page news again. Ukraine isn't a NATO member, but many NATO countries have supported it with weapons, training, and humanitarian aid. And countries near Russia, like Poland, the Baltics, and now Finland, are on edge because they feel like they might be next. So NATO's been beefing up its eastern presence, doing military exercises, and basically saying, we're ready if anything happens. And that brings us to one of the big controversies. Some people say NATO is provoking Russia by expanding east. Others say that countries chose to join NATO because they want protection, and that it's Russia's aggressive behavior that made them want that protection in the first place. It's a big debate, and there's no easy answer. But that's part of why NATO's role is so complex. Let's talk money for a second. NATO has a guideline, not a rule, just a goal, that each country should spend at least 2% of its GDP on defense. The US spends way more than that. Some countries meet the target, others don't. That's led to a lot of tension over the years. You've probably heard US presidents complain that Europe isn't paying enough. And fair or not, it's a real issue. Because if one country is spending billions and another is barely chipping in, it creates frustration inside the alliance. Another big question, does NATO still need to exist? After all, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and the Cold War is technically over. Some people say NATO is outdated, that it's a relic of the past. But with new threats like cyber attacks, terrorism, and renewed tensions with countries like Russia, many argue that NATO is more relevant than ever. In fact, countries are still trying to join it, not walk away from it. Also, NATO isn't just military muscle. It's also a political alliance. That means countries in NATO tend to share values like democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. It's not perfect, and yes, members have had disagreements, but being part of NATO is seen by many as a sign that a country wants to be part of a peaceful, rules-based international system. And yeah, sometimes NATO moves slow. Because every decision needs unanimous agreement, it can take time to act. But that's kind of the price of having a big alliance with so many voices. It's not a dictatorship. It's more like a group chat with 32 people where everyone has to say yes before you can do anything. To wrap it all up, NATO is basically a club for mutual defense, made up of a bunch of countries who've agreed to stand together. It started as a way to hold off the Soviet Union, but it's adapted over the years to deal with new challenges. Whether it's military threats, political pressure, or global instability, NATO's job is to keep the peace through strength and cooperation. Is it perfect? No. Is it necessary? That depends who you ask. But one thing is for sure, NATO is a major part of how international security works today. If you want to understand global politics, especially in Europe or between the West and Russia, you've got to understand what NATO is and what it does. And that's it. The full story in plain English. No jargon, no hype, just a real explanation of what NATO is, how it works, and why it still matters. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking with me. Hit that like button if this helped you out. And make sure to subscribe if you want more no-nonsense videos like this. See you next time.